Training camp coming up for the Cleveland Browns in Berea, and Dawg Pound Daily has their 3 defensive positions to watch at Browns training camp as well. And they have, to start out here, who will be the middle linebacker? Last year, Anthony Walker was the primary middle linebacker. You still have Jacob Phillips, who went down with injuries leading into the season last year. He could be somebody who gets more snaps. Then at cornerback, you've got Greg Newsome, Martin Emerson, obviously Denzel Ward, Greedy Williams, A.J. Green. A lot of interesting players on that depth chart. And then at defensive tackle, obviously a major need where you have Perion Winfrey selected in round 4, Jordan Elliott in 2020 selected in round 3, Tommy Togiai selected in round 4 last year, and then Taven Bryan, who was picked up in free agency. So to break all of these battles down, we bring in Chris Easterling of the Akron Beacon Journal. And Chris, 1, thank you very much for joining me, my friend. Appreciate the time. And 2, when it comes to training camp, of these battles and otherwise, what are you really looking forward to when it comes to these training camp battles?
I'm especially looking for. I think the defensive tackle spot is something that's going to be really interesting, just because I think it's such a critical piece of what this defense really can do, because they were all right against the run last year, but they certainly weren't good enough that I think that this defense needs to be. And, it was an area that they didn't really address much. And, they brought Perion Winfrey in through the draft. They obviously acquired Taven Bryan, but they need production there, because the edges of that defense is solid. Defensive line is solid with Clowney and Garrett. But those two interior spots are going to be so big for what that whole defense can do, especially against the run.
Well, and on top of that, too, it's almost like cause and effect a little bit here, because like you mentioned with the defensive tackle spots, you also still have that question with the middle linebacker spot between Anthony Walker, who came over from the Colts last offseason, going into this year now in his second year with Cleveland. How do you think that, the lack of additions, or, lack of major additions, I should say, at the defensive tackle spots, how do you think that affects that middle linebacker spot in the middle of that defense?
Well, I mean, you always hear defensive coaches talking about how, the linebackers play off the defensive linemen because, they keep them clean from blockers, and what a Jordan Elliott or a Bryan or whomever, maybe, and even a Clowney, if they slide him inside on some sets, what they can do, the more they can kind of occupy blockers, more frees up an Anthony Walker, a Jacob Phillips, Sione Takitaki, whomever you may talk about at that linebacker spot. It's critical. I mean, it really is, it's cliche, but it's true. It's such every key to every cog in the machine has to work for this thing to work at its peak potential, and for this defense to work, it needs those defensive tackles up the middle, the defensive tackles, and then those interior linebacker guys to play well this year, and again, to make that defense what they need it to be, especially early on, because we don't know how long the offense is going to be without Deshaun Watson due to the suspension. So I imagine the defense is going to be asked to carry a heavier load, and that, again, it goes, that defensive tackles, linebackers, all, making big plays.
Yeah, and, Chris, the other side of this as well, they mentioned the cornerback depth chart there. It feels like that cornerback group is kind of loaded a little bit this year after almost finding gold when it comes to Greedy Williams coming back off of injury, and then adding in somebody like Martin Emerson, who doesn't necessarily have to play right away. What are your thoughts on that cornerback group, and especially for somebody like Martin Emerson to kind of come in and, despite being the first pick taken by the Cleveland Browns, not necessarily having to play right away?
That's, you mentioned the very talented room, but I don't think there's any room that hinges more on good health than that cornerback room, because you think, we saw Denzel Ward at the end of mini camp, walk off the field with the trainer. Now, they said no structural damage. They felt confident he'd be back, by training camps, but there is a history with him. Greedy Williams, another one you mentioned, who's since he came out of LSU has been battling injury. But if they can stay healthy, it really shapes up as a nice room, because what it allows you to do is you can put Williams on the opposite side of Ward at the outside. You can slide Greg Newsome in to play the slot position where Troy Hill was last year, and it allows a Martin Emerson to grow and learn and not be forced to play a high level of important snaps. Not that he won't play, but you want to kind of bring him along. You don't want to just kind of like the bird pushing him out of the nest and see if they can fly. You want him to kind of develop and get his feet wet. But if a Williams or Denzel or even Greg Newsome, who did miss a couple of games last year, if you got some injuries there, I mean, it just kind of accelerates things for Emerson, and a third round rookie, you're hoping for the best, but it's still a lot to ask.